The Nike Pegasus Plus and the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, two performance trainers that are a lot more similar than they first seem, but which one is right for you? This video is a bit of a surprise to me for a couple reasons. With the Nike Pegasus Plus, this is a shoe that I watched very closely in the leaks, and this shoe was formerly known as the Nike Turbo 4. And the reason for the name change, I have a whole video about that. I'll put a link in the description to that if you're interested. But even through all of the leaks that I watched about this shoe over really the past year, maybe a little bit more, it never hit me what this shoe was going to be. I thought it would be a little bit more up-tempo from the standard Pegasus. I didn't think it would be as performance-oriented as it was. So when I got it and went out for the first runs in it, I was really shocked. Because also when I get a shoe that's this important, I generally have a couple other comparisons that I know I'm going to do, maybe 2 or 3, which you'll see on this channel. And the shoes I originally was going to compare this to just turned out that they weren't really the case, which is where this shoe comes in, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. Now, the big surprise with this shoe for me is that I am not a fan of Saucony, and I did not think I would enjoy this shoe, but this shoe has proven itself over the past few months to me since I started running it in April, that it is a constant performer, and I really enjoyed this shoe, and I've run in it a few times recently, and it's really sort of impressed me, and I have some updated opinions on that. So putting these two shoes head to head was nothing that I had planned on doing, but the more I ran in this and the more I thought back to my experiences with this, I realized that these really are the two shoes to compare right now in the performance trainer space. And the best place to begin to see that is looking at the specs. So with the Nike Pegasus Plus and the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, as you can see from a spec standpoint, there are some similarities. Now the stack height is much higher at 3830 in the Endorphin Speed 4 than the Pegasus Plus. And I will say that on foot, you do feel that extra stack height, especially in the heel. The drop in the Pegasus Plus is 10 mil. The drop in the Endorphin Speed 4 is 8 mil. But I will say the Pegasus Plus feels flatter than the Endorphin Speed 4. Now, the real feel of the Pegasus Plus is probably closer 6 to 8, whereas with the Endorphin Speed 4, it really does feel like 8, though I think when you weight the foam, it's probably closer to 6. But the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 does feel more substantial with a higher drop than the Pegasus Plus. As far as the weight of the two shoes, they're actually fairly similar. The Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 is a little bit lighter, but it's nothing that you're actually going to feel on foot. And in fact, when you pick these two shoes up side by side, the Pegasus Plus feels a little lighter. I think that's just the airiness of Zoom X. Now, this gets into the major differences in build between these two shoes. In the Nike Pegasus Plus, you have a full Zoom X one-piece midsole. There's no plate, there's no shank, there's no carrier foam. It is full Zoom X. It is the more rubberized Zoom X, the one that has been previously found in the Streak Fly, the Invincible, but it's still Zoom X. You still get that feel of Zoom X. And there is a mild forefoot rocker, and I would call it a fairly modern ride, though the geometry overall is very traditional. And because there are no plates or shanks in this midsole, and Zoom X is a very compressive, very flexible material, this shoe does ride very traditionally. On the opposite end of that, in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, we have two pieces of Power MPB above and below a nylon winged plate. Now, this is a plated shoe, but it's still a very flexible shoe because the plate in this shoe is a nylon plate. It's very, very flexible. And it also has Saucony's speed roll technology, which is an exaggerated toe spring in the shoe, which makes this shoe very, very rolly off the toe. Another thing that's really interesting about these two shoes is they're actually both Pebax foam. Pebax is the brand name from Arkema of the Peba foam that both Nike and Saucony use, though they're using slightly different variations of it. Saucony is actually using a beaded version of Pebax foam, which is something that they put in the original Endorphin series way back when to increase durability. And it is a more durable foam, but you do sacrifice a little of the pop and bounce in the shoe. Though looking at the ride characteristics of these shoes, I would call the Pegasus Plus very resilient. You get that Zoom X sink, but you get an extreme resiliency or energy return when you unweight the shoe from Zoom X, and that's a quintessential Zoom X feel. Whereas the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 is actually quite bouncy. It's not as resilient as Zoom X, but you do get some sink and you do get that sort of energy return out, though just not as extreme. Combine that with the speed roll technology in the plate, and you have a very bouncy, rolly ride in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. And looking at the outsole and the contact patch of these two shoes, you'll see that in the forefoot, both shoes are very similar. However, where the widest point is in a little bit of a different place. The Nike Pegasus Plus puts the widest point slightly behind the ball of the foot, which makes you land a little bit further back in the shoe, which makes you engage the Zoom X foam more, gives you more of an explosive ride. Where in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, the widest point is, again, kind of right on the ball of the foot. And that in combination with the speed roll technology and the plate in this shoe makes this shoe extremely rolling off the toe. It's a very nice feeling. Also, as you can see on the Endorphin Speed 4, the waist and the heel are much wider, making the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, even though it is a taller stack, feeling much more stable. And that's a hallmark of Saucony shoes. They generally always put heel, medial, and lateral flaring in them for stability, and they have wider waists, as Saucony just builds some mild stability features into all of their shoes. And from a rubber coverage on the outsole between these two shoes, I'm actually going to say I significantly prefer the outsole on the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. However, I prefer the compound on the Nike Pegasus Plus. I think it's grippier. The Pegasus Plus outsole works. I just think it's a missed opportunity. I think it could have been much better. In fact, if it looked more like what's on the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, I think the Pegasus Plus would ride even better. And it rides really good right now. So both these shoes I think have really good rubber coverage, but the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 I think has better coverage that flexes better with the shoe. Moving to the fit of these two shoes, starting with the Nike Pegasus Plus, this is very much a Pegasus from the heel. It has the same heel counter, same ankle collar, which is very padded, deep pocket back here. There should be no heel lift issues. Where this shoe differs from a standard Pegasus is in the midfoot and the forefoot, because this actually has a fly knit upper. And it feels like fly knit from maybe 10 years ago. It's that sock-like fly knit that wraps around the foot. So the midfoot and the forefoot of this shoe really conform around the foot, really hold it very sock-like. This eyelet chain on the Pegasus Plus, while I think the standard peg has probably a little bit better lockdown, this actually works really well in combination with the fly knit material, giving you, again, that sock-like fit in the midfoot. And the toe box in this shoe is much higher volume, and it has more room for your toes to wiggle around in here. So you get a very locked-in heel, a very good midfoot lockdown, and a very flexible forefoot of this shoe, making the fit of the shoe very performance-oriented, and it feels great. And moving to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, I think the most criticism I have for this shoe is in this upper. I really do not like the upper on this shoe. I don't like the materials. They feel cheap. They feel scratchy. I think the fit of this shoe is sloppy overall. I just wish this had a better upper on it, but it works, and it's not caused me any problems. I don't get any heel lift in here, even though there isn't as deep of a pocket in the heel of the shoe as there is on the Pegasus Plus. The eyelet chain is overly complicated. These sort of two black bands on each side don't really do much. But again, it works. It locks my foot in. And the toe box shape of the shoe, while there is good volume, it's just got a strange shape to it. It's a little bit kind of square, rounded off. It's just an odd shape. It's not really foot shaped. But again, it hasn't caused me any problems. So I think the material selection of this just feels cheap. But like I said, the shoe fits my foot and it does what it's meant to do. Hasn't caused any problems, which is a lot more than I can say about a lot of other shoes. But other than my criticism of the upper on this shoe, that's kind of where my criticism of this shoe ends. From a fit standpoint, I went true to size with both of these. These are both US men's size 9. And from a width standpoint, neither one of these shoes is particularly wide. In the Pegasus Plus, though, since it has that really sock-like fly knit upper, and it has a very wide midsole on it, I think a wide-ish foot would be able to fit in the shoe because the upper material will accommodate a wide-ish foot, though you may have to go up half a size to get that extra room. I don't know if there will be a wide version of this shoe. It's something you'll just have to wait and see from Nike. For this shoe, the upper isn't as accommodating, but there is a lot of room in this. Where I said it's kind of a sloppy fit, part of that is because it's just a very roomy upper. While this isn't a wide shoe, I do think a wide foot, particularly a wide-ish foot, will do very well in here because there's just a lot of material and a lot of room in this upper. And that brings us to the ride of these two shoes. Now, I've said in other videos that I don't like the term super trainer, and frankly, I'm going to stop using it on this channel because I don't think it really means anything anymore. Even though this was probably one of the best super trainers over the past couple of years, I think the only one that really competes with this would be the Adidas Boston 12, and I made those videos. I'll put a link in the description to that video. So what I'm going to call this type of shoe instead is just a performance trainer. You have a non-plated performance trainer and a plated performance trainer. And that's where this shoe is such a surprise, because this shoe I feel like is really punching above its weight, because traditionally non-plated performance trainers just don't have the oomph that their plated performance trainers do. But in this case, these two shoes really go head to head. And I think the best way to illustrate this is to go to my performance matrix. Now, this is a matrix that I've shown in a lot of these versus videos, and it's covering 4 areas that I would expect any trainer, especially a performance trainer, to be able to handle. And if we map both these shoes on this matrix, and I've shown both these before in other videos, we get this. Now, I have adjusted the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 a little bit from the last time it was on this matrix, because I've run in it recently and I've changed my impression of it just slightly. And the change here is that I've extended its sweet spot into the threshold zone just a little bit. Now, the orange and yellow line is really I think where the shoe is best at. Now, either one of these shoes can do either one of these categories, but I think the line is where it's best at. And the red to orange is really the sweet spot of the shoe, what it really performs best at. And in the case of the Pegasus Plus, this is a shoe that I find for threshold running, it works beautifully. It is really, really great for that. It can really step it up and pick up the pace into max effort, getting into intervals and reps, and it can slow back down into steady. I don't think it's best for true easy running. I actually think that's where the standard Pegasus 41 is better. It can do that easy running. I just think it's a little slappy, and it's just a little bit more eager to get up and go than, I think I would want an easy running shoe to do, though it is comfortable for the easy running. Moving to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, I think oddly, even though it's a plated shoe, it's a plated performance trainer, I think it does the easy running very well. And this is, I think, the shoe that is really been the kind of poster child of the super trainers to be used for daily running. And I think the Endorphin Speed 4 does that really well. I still would not recommend a plated shoe as your daily trainer, but if you had to do easy running, like in a workout where you're doing easy running between reps, I think the Endorphin Speed does that very well. But the sweet spot of the shoe is really in steady, just getting into threshold. So steady running to me is about 20 to 30 seconds off your race pace, and the Endorphin Speed does that really well. And if you pick that up and just start to push into threshold or your race pace, I think it does really well. However, once you get up to a certain point in your threshold running and begin to really push it towards that max effort work, I think overall the Power and PB foam lets you down. I think this is why Saucony opted to put Power and HG in the Endorphin Pro 4 above the plate, because it gives that a little bit more legs, because I think Power and PB on its own just falls down a little bit when you're really getting into the max effort stuff. But otherwise, everything else that the shoe does is really brilliant. And that ultimately is the big surprise here. The Peg Plus really is the faster shoe between these two shoes. A lot of that comes down to the ZoomX foam in the shoe. You just cannot beat ZoomX foam. Even when there's no plate or no shank in the shoe, it still is just, there's so much energy return and there's so much explosive power in this foam that you just can't beat it. It's not to say that this shoe isn't bad. I think this is probably one of the best plated performance trainers out there. It's just, for me, the Peg Plus is just a little bit better. This feels a little bit more natural. And honestly, if I can run in a non-plated trainer and do a lot of this sort of threshold running workout type speed work in a non-plated performance trainer, that's what I want to do, because I want the training effect of the non-plated shoe. So this is obviously going to be the better shoe for me, though I think, again, I would be happy doing this work in either one of these shoes. And this is where you get into rotation building with either one of these shoes. Now, I've previously shown this in other videos, where I think the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 is sort of the missing link between a Pegasus and a Vaporfly. Now, I depend on the Pegasus Vaporfly combination of trainer racer quite a bit. I have for many years. But there's always been a missing link here for Nike. Nike's just never had a fast shoe that really worked in between those. Yes, I know the Zoom Fly exists, but it's not that. It's really not the Zoom Fly. And the Streak Fly exists, but the Streak Fly is maybe a little bit too minimal for that longer work. So when I ran in the Endorphin Speed 4 earlier this year, because of the flexible nature of that shoe and how flexible the plate is, I found it just a really good bridge between the Pegasus and the Vaporfly, because the Vaporfly is also a fairly flexible ride, at least compared to other super shoes out there, especially in the low plate configuration category like the Vaporfly. So doing a lot of your faster or tempo work in the Endorphin Speed 4 and getting used to leveraging a more flexible plate was great training for actually racing the Vaporfly 3. And while I think this rotation works really well, now Nike has this, the Pegasus Plus, and I think it really can fill in this fast area that the Endorphin Speed was probably the best bet for very well. Because as I said, if I can do this work of this fast running in a non-plated performance trainer, I want that training effect. And this effect of going from a Peg 41 to the Peg Plus to the Vaporfly 3, this sort of all Nike rotation, all Nike technology, makes a lot of sense, and this feels very natural. As a Nike runner and someone who kind of always goes back to Nike mostly because of fit and foams, it's exciting now to have this sort of trainer fast shoe race rotation that's all Nike that hasn't really existed in a long time. And the bottom line for both these shoes is you really can't go wrong with either one. While this is my preference, because I will always prefer the non-plated shoe if that is an option to do a lot of this work, this faster, more tempo style work, speed work even. And it's so nice that Nike finally has a shoe that can do that work, because again, it's been a while since they had that. But the Peg Plus is the lower to the ground, more ground feel, puts much more emphasis on your foot and the training effect of actually running in a non-plated shoe to do that work, and it's rather brilliant. Where the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 is going to put more emphasis on the technology in this, the foam, the plate, and the speed roll technology of the toe spring in the plate rolling you forward. So this is the flatter, more ground feel ride. This is the more rolling, more foam feel ride. Again, both shoes work. It's going to come down to really personal preference of which one you'll prefer over these two shoes. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If you already are a subscriber, I've now enabled memberships on this channel. Click the join button below the video title, or use the link in the description if you're on the YouTube app on an iOS device, and you can find out more. If neither one of those options are great, leave a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.